Okay, here we are. So today is March 3rd, 2021. Happy Wednesday. 2 days until all late work is due, and lots of people are turning in work. For those of us that are really behind, you know who you are. Man, just be sure you get the major grades done. Research 1 and 2, and then the script and your podcast or trifold. They're not difficult. They don't take that much time, but do quality work. I've had several students go from a grade in the 40s to in the 70s. A couple went up to the 80s just because they did so good on those test grades. So that's the smart way to do it, right? Take care of the test grades. And hey, the podcast is easy. You already made the script. All you have to do is read it into the Anchor app, and boom, add the details, submit it, and share it with Carvajal. The only one that's going to listen to it is me, and then you don't have to worry about making a trifold brochure. So that's the easiest option, and I hope y'all decide to do that. So today we will focus on how a character's status affects the story and how we relate to the story or novel. And then, of course, that mindset of I will do the work now. Once again, today's work is a grade for today, plus it'll be a makeup grade. So if you want to get rid of a 0, be sure and message me, and I'll give you that grade up to an 85 on a 0 on a missing. So keep that in mind. So I will read and think about how the desires, anxieties, and behaviors of my character add to literary work's meaning. And then for our close, think like a writer. Well, how do characters create the theme? How do you say it? How would you think it? We all kind of know that. We've talked about it. It was on our quiz. But how would you put it in your own words? And that'll be our discussion and close. And let's do our positive affirmations. We'll tell ourselves what to think and to be positive on purpose. So say them with me, either out loud or in your head. What are you? I am strong, confident, and successful. Yes, we are. And how do you feel about getting work done? I love getting work done. Don't it feel good when you know you did good work and got a good grade? Yes, it does. And how do you feel about schoolwork? The harder I work, the stronger I become. Okay, and little Carvajal comedy. It quickly became clear that Bob had misread the advertisement for Pilates class. What kind of class did Bob think it was? Not Pilates, right? Yeah, I know, that's dumb. Y'all put up with me somehow. Okay, so we want to think about characters and think about Jerry. Let's go back to our question yesterday in Schoology. How does 2 explore coming of age? And we had some interesting answers. And it's funny, a number of people looked at it the opposite of how I looked at it. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. Noelle says Jerry's facing to the other side. She gives him the okay to go by himself, and he doesn't want her to worry. It creates a sense of identity that Jerry must try and fulfill for himself. At some point, he'll have to do things on his own. And that's the point here, that idea that he does want to do things on his own. But his determination is that he'll make a name for himself even if he has a chance of death. And that's kind of how I saw it. Like, he is independent, and he is going to do it on his own. He doesn't want anybody's help. At the end, he doesn't want people's approval. And that's kind of how I saw it too, Noelle. That makes a lot of sense. Jackie put, went to the beach without asking permission, was not considering the consequences. He's trying to prove himself. He could be like the big kids. He later puts himself in a dangerous situation. His experience later caused him to learn his lesson and gain a bit much more maturity. Well, and if you mean that it caused him to learn his lesson that he shouldn't have, snuck around his mom, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I didn't see it that way. I saw it to where, yeah, I did it. I don't have to prove it to anybody else. So that's really cool, Paul, that you saw it that way. Jackie, excuse me. Charlie is very clear about this. He makes a hard decision, risks his life to crawl through the tunnel, the nose bleeding, and he climbs through. He realizes he doesn't want the big kids. He just wanted to go home and rest. He shouldn't overdo himself like she told him before. And he agrees with her, right? Like, yeah, Mom, I'm going to stay home. He's already accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. This was similar, saying that he made a bad choice and he learned his lesson. And Luke says towards the end of the story, he doesn't want to prove himself to older kids. He has his own personal goal. And that's how I saw it too. Man, I succeeded. I made my goal, and I don't have to show to anybody else. And I think there was a part there where he says, he saw the big kids. He didn't want to go over to them. Brandon kind of talks about he learning his lesson too. So it all depends on how you look at it, right? Do you look at it like he made a stupid decision, he almost killed himself, and now he's not going to try and cross mom anymore? And that's valid. It is. Or are you thinking he's proud of himself, that he worked through it, he got it done, and he has that sense of self-esteem that he's not gonna back down. He's gonna do things his way. And there is no right answer, right? I saw it one way, somebody else saw it a different way, and that's what's so great about literature. We can put our own thoughts into it. Josue says he got mad when his mom wanted to join him anywhere. He wanted to spread his wings. That's some great figured language, right? And he wants to be independent. He was trying to prove himself. He can be like the big kids, but he ends up putting himself in a bad situation. That made him open his eyes more and learn a valuable lesson. So great thinking, ladies and gentlemen. Thank y'all for putting your thoughts into there. I appreciate it. But for today's work, we're going to do more with that same story. If you go into Wednesday's work, and our discussion, our close is, well, how do the characters and how the writers create the characters, how does that create the theme? So be thinking about that. And then outsider info quest. And this is our assignment here. Through the tunnel, close read. Go ahead and open that up. Not that big. Through the tunnel, close read. We are going to reread a small section of it, and we're going to think about how this is creating Jerry and making us care about Jerry because of how Jerry struggles. And the big point is the figurative language and the details that show the connotations of Jerry being an outsider, Jerry struggling, Jerry not fitting in. And that makes a big difference for a character. So let's talk about that for a little bit here before we get started. So is the protagonist an outsider? And I think we can all pretty much agree that Jerry is definitely an outsider. He has trouble fitting in. He's in a new setting and environment. He sees things differently from others. And kind of like what I talked about before, right? If your character suffers, it makes people care about them. And yeah, we root for characters because the odds are stacked against them. The fact that Jerry really could hurt himself and die makes us care what happens to him, right? So that's important. We haven't talked about connotation in a long time, so let's take a moment to talk about that, because we talked about connotation when we were doing the multi-genre thing, talking about poetry. But remember, connotation is the idea or feeling that words invoke, in addition to their literal or primary meaning. The example I always give is father, right? The dictionary term, the denotation of father is the male parent of a child. Great, so what? But when we're talking about connotation, well, it has to be the feelings, the ideas, the meaning behind it. And of course, if you had a great relationship with dad growing up, you'd have some really good positive connotations. If all dad did was be a jerk and yell and he was never around when you needed him, you would have different connotations, right? So it depends on how you connect with it. And that human ability to connect with language and connect it to our own lives is so powerful. So connotation, different connotations with different figurative language. Sad, like a boy who dropped his ice cream. Oh, pobrecito. Sad, like your team lost the game because you missed the shot. Ouch. Those have different connotations, don't they? And which one is the right one? Well, there is no right one, right? It's up to you. What kind of story are you writing? If you're writing about a little kid or a funny story, this might very much be appropriate. If you're writing teen fiction or for older kids, this would be, right? I used this one last week. Embarrassed, like you just farted in a car full of people. Whoops, that's embarrassing. That's terrible. That's funny, embarrassed. Embarrassed. Oh, the screen share thing's blocking it. Like you forgot your anniversary, but your spouse didn't. different kind of embarrassed, right? This, oops, people are going to want to open the window and start cursing at me. This one, uh-oh, the wife might be kicking you out of the house. So it depends on, once again, the kind of story that you're trying to write. And of course, when you're creating these characters, you're probably not going to do this on the first shot. When you're first writing, like I always say, do it wrong, just use your imagination, get it written. But once it's written, well, that's when you go in and you add the specific details and you add the figurative language that makes the reader feel like they're right there, like they're experiencing it too. And that's so important. So here's an example. Her heart was like a sweet little bird. Oh, what a nice girl, right? Her heart was like a yellow canary shimmering like gold in the morning sun. There's a big difference because of the details. This is something you could actually picture, right? Details. The magic is in the details. They're both similes, but notice how detailed this is. And this gives you a much stronger vision in your mind than this does. Her heart was cold. Okay, that's nice. Her heart was a buzzard tearing strings of bloody flesh off a dead deer on the side of the road. Huge difference between this and that, right? So as usual, the magic is in the details, and the figurative language really makes a difference too. And that's what we're going to be looking for as we read this small section from yesterday, or from the day before, from part 1 of Through the Tunnel. So as we read, I want you to notice things that stand out, the details and the figurative language that shows you the emotion that Jerry is feeling, the things going on around him that show him to be that outsider kid that doesn't fit in. So I'm going to read through this and you can read along, but be sure to open up your own copy. In fact, let me stop screen sharing. Open up your own copy, read along with me, and I want you to highlight stuff that stand out to you. Oh, this is really cool. So let me just show you before I stop screen sharing. So he swam, language you didn't understand, right? Here we go. He swam a little closer. They turned and watched him with narrowed, alert, dark eyes. Then one smiled and waved. It was enough. In a minute, he had swum in and was on the rocks beside them, smiling with a desperate, nervous supplication. So the same way I did it, you just highlight, click on the comment tool, and you put why that stands out. And this is a description of his mood, right? A desperate, nervous supplication. He's being desperate and nervous. And like in my example one here, right? He's acting desperate and nervous, makes him seem weak and needy. And I just gave a definition of it there. You don't have to do that, of course. But if you see, once again, figurative language or description details that show how Jerry is an outsider, how Jerry's emotional state is, highlight it and comment on it. So for this assignment, you need to make 4 comments, 4 highlights. Talk about connotations of figurative language or the effect of details on the readers. Find 4 of them. That's part of the grade. And then, how does Jerry's outsider status influence his behavior in this scene? How does that affect that he's an outsider? And of course, you can use one of your highlighted things as your text evidence, right? So give text evidence to support your answer. How does Jerry's outsider status influence his behavior in this scene? Okay, so get your own copy open and read along with me. Or if you want to read on the screen, that's fine too. Okay, excerpt from Through the Tunnel by Doris Lessing. The English boy swam toward them, but kept his distance at a stone's throw. They were of that coast. All of them were burned, smooth, dark brown, and speaking a language he did not understand. He swam a little closer. They turned and watched him with narrowed, alert, dark eyes. Then one smiled and waved. It was enough. In a minute, he had swum in and was on the rock beside them, smiling with a desperate, nervous supplication. They shouted cheerful greetings at him. And then, as he preserved his nervous, uncomprehending smile, those are interesting details there, they understood that he was a foreigner strayed from his own beach, and they proceeded to forget him, but he was happy he was with them. The boys dive, go under the rock. Jerry tries and can't do it. When he came up, the boys were all on the diving rock, preparing to attempt the feat again. And now, in a panic of failure, he yelled up in English, Look at me, look! And he began splashing and kicking in the water like a foolish dog. They looked down gravely, frowning. He knew to frown. At moments of failure when he clowned to claim his mother's attention, it was with just this grave, embarrassed inspection that she rewarded him. Through his hot shame, feeling the pleading grin on his face like a scar that he could never remove, he looked up at the group of big brown boys on the rock and shouted, Bonjour, merci, au revoir, monsieur, monsieur, while he hooked his fingers around his ears and waggled them. Water surged into his mouth. He choked, sank, came up. The rock, lately weighted with boys, seemed to rear up out of the water as their weight was removed. They were flying down past him now into the water. The air was full of falling bodies. Then the rock was empty in the hot sunlight. And you can go ahead and continue reading from there till the end. Once again, find 4 things to highlight and comment on, paying attention to the figurative language, the similes, the metaphors, and the vivid descriptions of imagery. And then answer the question. And once you're done, once again, go into think like a writer. How do characters create the theme? What do y'all think? And we'll talk about that tomorrow.